violence. We have Jackson County Prosecuting Attorney Kelsey Guernsey and City of Jackson Chief of Police Chris Simpson. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bart. Good to be here again.
Yeah, good to have you here. And this is going to be, for both of you, new roles in new offices as you participate in this upcoming summit.
Yeah. This committee's been really good for us. Chris has been on it through his role at the Sheriff's Department before, but it's been new for me. And it's actually one that I'm somewhat expected to lead so it's been really helpful to work with these guys that have been doing it, and trying to make sure all of our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. And I'm really excited about this year's summit.
It's funny, we get to the table to start the first, planning sessions and everything, and we're looking at Kelsey, and she's like, well, I guess I'm in charge of this. I was like, you guessed correctly. You certainly are. And she certainly has taken it by the reins and ran with it very good thus far. And we're certainly looking forward to a good summit this year.
So it changes every year. Different theme, we've got different guests and different focus. What is it for this year?
Yeah, so domestic violence is our theme for this year. And you're right, we've even had different kind of ways of getting that information out there. This year we're almost choosing a group approach, if you will. We're kind of pulling from different things that we think have worked well in past years. So we have a keynote speaker. We're going to have some breakout spaces for people to learn more about dating violence and domestic violence and law enforcement's response to those things. We also have kind of a mini ACEs training, so adverse childhood experiences training that we're going to put on. And then we're going to have a panel. And the panel's goal is to focus on breaking down the barriers in either trying to leave a violent situation or find services in Jackson County, and what can we do and what information can we share with everybody who attends about how we can break down those barriers.
Great. Well, it seems like, and Chris, if you were to look at, if an untrained eye were to look at the police blotter, for example, you see an awful lot of calls that sound like they're domestic situations.
Yes.
Is this number one?
I think you certainly hit on a good point, because a lot of it is domestic related in certain instances. And it may not be a domestic violence, but it certainly could have a domestic relation twinge to it. And it certainly does lead the way in our investigations, on a daily operation.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a physical altercation. It can be two people screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yes, or somebody stole this from me, or, it's a myriad of things that could be domestic related.
Are you guys bringing in some outside resources to participate in the summit?
Absolutely. And I think having an outside resource, not just the keynote speaker, but panelists, people who survived, how they survived, what they went through. And if you look at the theme, awareness, access, and action, we're trying to bring components of all three of those within the whole summit. And we're going to do it between, 8 to 2, 8 to 1:30?
8 to 1:30, yeah.
We're going to be hustling, but we're going to get it done. There's no question about it.
So you've learned some new things, like in gun violence, gang and group violence. You know,
Yes.
there's some strategies, some new methods. With domestic violence, are there any things that are new in terms of strategies in reducing this kind of violence?
I mean, I think awareness and an understanding is the biggest ability we have to reduce this. Helping people understand, to Chris's point, not just the physical, but what are the other sides of it? What's the emotional? What's the financial? What are the things that you might pick up on before it gets to a physical, if you're somebody in a violent relationship or in a domestic violence relationship? And the biggest thing for us, I think, is to make our community aware of how many services are here in Jackson. The Aware Shelter is on board, and we have some local counselors that are going to come talk about different therapy sessions and things that could assist. We have Family Service and Children's Aid, Department of Health and Human Services, Lifeways.
Yes, indeed.
We've got so many services here in Jackson that we really want to help explore and explain to everybody that there's a lot here that could assist you.
So that education piece is crucial. And we certainly want to make sure that the community comes out and, be a part of that education. And probably the most important piece, and I steal this from John Willis, is what's the action behind the summit? What are we going to do after the summit to reduce, this type of domestic violence?
And it seems like we talk about it more. I mean, it's not, a hidden secret.
Right.
And do you think that helps with the treatment of domestic violence?
I definitely do. And I think historically domestic violence, like other kind of interfamily assaults, have been thought as a family issue, right? We're just going to deal with it within the family. We don't want to bring law enforcement involved. We don't want to bring the court system involved.
Good point.
But we're starting to, we call it planting seeds and laying breadcrumbs in our office of trying to make those connections with victims who maybe aren't ready to go forward with the process, but they come in, they meet with us, and we can plant those seeds for if there's a next time, now maybe they're willing to participate with us. And I think law enforcement does a good job of doing the same thing.
You guys have a guest speaker who's also a survivor of domestic violence. What can you tell us about Tanesha Ash-Shakur?
She has a nonprofit up in Lansing.
Yes, she does.
And I think it's called Voices of Color, if I have that correct.
That's correct.
And she's an incredible human. She went back and got her law degree kind of as part of her journey. She's a survivor and advocate. She has built a nonprofit in Lansing with the goal of figuring out where are the gaps in our system, whether it's a criminal justice system, whether it's a law enforcement response, whether it's an aware shelter type response. Where are those gaps, and then how can her nonprofit pick those up? So we're really excited to have her. She is an incredible woman, and I think she'll have a really powerful message for everybody who attends.
Yes, indeed. I think not just her institutional knowledge, but her experience and what she lived, what she went through to get to where she is today, I think is very important. And I think she uses the term champion of change. And people need to have that success story, need to know, because they could have been in her shoes where she started. And here she is giving a map to how she got to where she is and what she's doing right now to help those behind her.
Chris, when you think back to the early days when you were a police officer to now, is there a difference, is there a change in how a police agency handles and responds to a domestic?
I think from a legislative standpoint, from when I started to right now, there's been some change. There's some changes on what the police shall do. When I started, you could actually give a ticket for domestic assault, or you could separate the two and, try to implement some enforcement that way. I think legislatively now, and the way laws and the way law enforcement are trained right now, if there is any evidence of any assault, we are taking a person into custody and making sure they see the judge, the next 20-something hours, within that 20 hours.
And how about from the prosecution standpoint?
For sure, and some similar things, we've got new statutes that allow for first-time offenders to keep something maybe off your record, kind of protect maybe employment opportunities or things like that if you're a first-time offender. And our crime victim rights unit and the statutes that kind of go with that really have encompassed and enfolded the domestic violence victims world and survivors. And there's also some statutory changes in terms of that. But what I can even say just in my, almost 11 years now of being in Jackson, how officers respond to those victims, they've gotten just so much more compassionate and understanding. It can sometimes be frustrating when you see the same people, calling for law enforcement help, coming to our office, seeking charges. But I think as a system and whole, we get the science behind it a little more. We have been educated better, and so we understand that most victims, it takes multiple times of trying to leave before they're able to get out of a violent situation. And I think we just continue to work well together in providing resources for people. And I've seen that grow immensely just in my tenure here. That's
great. So we've got a day. It's from, 8 till 1:30. It's a long day. What all is going to go on that day at the America One Event Center? Is there food?
Absolutely. There's going to be, and that is on the flyer. There is a light breakfast and there is a lunch that will be provided. Like you said, it's going to go from 8 to 1:30. It's going to be a very quick pace of passing out the information and getting the information and coming up with an action. But we're going to start, obviously, with our guest speaker. Our guest speaker is going to speak, educate us. We're going to break down into 3 breakout sessions. One is going to talk about education. One is going to talk about laws and consequences. And the other third piece is the ACES training. After that concludes, we're going to get together and we're going to host a panel of law enforcement, mental health, some domestic violence survivors, as well as our guest speaker. And Kelsey and I will moderate that and ask, some questions that are relevant to the topics, and also get some feedback and some questions in from our audience who will be able to question the panel as well.
Throughout the duration, we'll also have all those informational tables in the back.
Good point.
So kind of it's an even bigger group, right? Not, those on our panel will also have informational tables, but we've opened that up to even more organizations and groups in Jackson to even include gun locks, right?
Yes,
We've got
indeed.
Overwatch Security who's going to provide gun locks. Gun violence, domestic violence is not immune to gun violence. They definitely go hand in hand. So we've got, all these informational tables for services and some handouts if you're looking for a gun lock too.
And this is one of those situations where you mentioned repeat offenders. It's typical that you'll make a visit to the same address over and over again in domestic situations.
That is very true, and our system does tag that. Obviously, it's kept on record for the way they dispatch officers, deputies, troopers, PSOs as well, so that the officers are armed with as much information as possible. Because you have to remember, they're going into a situation that is very emotionally charged, and if it's a repeat call for service, depending on what happened last time, that just brings the situation to be potentially more volatile. So they certainly take all those considerations, and we have our certain tactical approaches to these residents, trying to get a peaceful resolve at the end.
Other than a full house of people, anything else you need for next Wednesday's event?
No, I think we're just looking for people to come out and learn and figure out what they can add to the conversation and how we can better our community, with the awareness, access, and action. Those are our
Yes.
goals. So we're excited.
And on that flyer that's posted, there's a QR code on how people can register. Well, leading you to register.
Yes.
So.
There's also our goal is to have a lot of high school students. I don't think
Yeah.
we've talked about that
I
at all.
agree.
But we've partnered with JPS, Northwest, Western, I think Columbia. I think they've all kind of are going to send a contingency of high school students, and then we're going to have an entire breakout for them that's dating violence and healthy relationships that Aware is going to put on. So we're excited to kind of have the whole gamut of ages and experiences there, and really educate and make people aware of what's going on.
Great point. A lot of kids are victims of domestic violence.
Yes, indeed.
Or live in a situation.
And that's the flip side too, is they might not be in a violent relationship themselves, but they might have been exposed to it, and helping, our youth understand what that looks like, sometimes the impact of what that can be. It can impact future relationships. There's a really big trickle down for that, and that ACES training will be really, really important for that.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you guys are putting this on. Thanks for doing that, and good luck with it next week.
Thank you, we're
Thank you,
excited.
Bart.
It's Domestic Violence Awareness, Access, and Action next Wednesday, April 23rd at the American One Event Center. Thanks to Prosecutor Kelsey Guernsey and Chief Chris Simpson.